Today we're going to be reviewing this book, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, the tactics, routines, and habits of billionaires, icons, and world-class performers. I'm going to be very straightforward and honest with you. I honestly do not recommend this book at all. I think it's kind of a waste of time, and I'm going to get into exactly why you probably shouldn't read it, and this would honestly be at the bottom of my list to read. But I'm going to get through the notes and kind of talk about the format. So Tim Ferriss is a pretty successful person. He's done entrepreneur stuff. And as a result, he has a podcast that he has a lot of really famous people on. And so this is just a collection of snippets from his podcast, but it's not really he doesn't go in depth for each person. What he does is he just kind of summarizes what he thinks they are kind of important. And he asks them kind of some weird questions like, what's your spirit animal? What do you like to do? What's your routines like? And, it's Tools of Titans, which kind of means it's how do billionaires, kind of function. But one big problem with this is there's hundreds of, let's say, billionaires here, right? You start to realize that each person who's successful is kind of different in their routine. And you shouldn't just be copying their routine blindly, because the routine is not necessarily what made them successful. It's just something they're doing now. So a lot of them are super health optimized. They do stretching. They do all this complicated morning routine stuff. And I personally didn't really like how Tim Ferriss, he would say after every single thing, it was crazy. Some people do weird different kinds of yoga. They do different kinds of meditation. And after every single one, Tim Ferriss is oh, yeah, I do that too. And after the 50th person, you're how can you possibly be doing all of this and actually still have time for work? So that was one of my big critiques of it. I think it's interesting. I think the biggest takeaway is just, if you want to be successful, you have to read. All these people read. They all have book recommendations. And I think it's just a collective thing. If you want to be successful, you have to read, because you need to gain as much knowledge as possible. If you think about success is having 1 million pieces of the right pieces of knowledge, right? So you should really just be every day trying to figure out how can you get to those 1 million pieces as fast as possible. And reading is really a big thing. I don't know if you can see here. These are all the books I've read. And this is only going to grow, right? So focus on reading, and let's get straight into, the summary of what are the big takeaways. So the whole beginning of the book is all about how to be healthier. So that's why I think this is not necessarily a success book. It's one of those books that you read after you become successful and you want to figure out how to optimize your life. So this is not something that's going to, make you a bunch of money. It's going to talk about how to actually be healthy, how to find meaning after you have money, and those kind of bigger picture problems. Yeah, so like I said, the book covers a bit about routine optimization for both morning and evening routines, and a lot of health hacks for better strength and sleeping better, which is great, but just understand that's what you're getting when you get this book. The book highly recommends meditation. The first 100 pages are health related, and then it starts actually getting into mindset stuff. It's really good for well-rounded success, but I'll be honest with you, most people don't have time to optimize all aspects of their life, right? You have to have some sort of financial independence. You have to have a bit of freedom, so you don't have to work as much to focus on how exactly do I maximize my sleep. Of course, right, get some sleep, don't be on your phone before you go to bed. That's very basic stuff, and that's totally enough. But if you start talking about taking supplements, and in the morning you need to go get sunlight and do all this complicated stuff, it's your routines are going to cost you success in the sense that you're not actually going to get to work on the things that matter because you have all these crazy routines. There are also some very successful people that all they do is just wake up and work, right? So that's a balancing act too, because you can't just assume that now these people who are successful, because they have a lot of time, they do these routines. Just by doing those routines isn't going to lead you to the same level of success that they have. Yeah, so don't worry about emphasize or trying to just make all this optimized stuff, right? Just keep it simple, focus on your goals and where you want to go, and just work towards that every day. And you should be on a really strong path to success. About halfway through the book, he starts talking about startup investing in Silicon Valley and his experience with it. And he uses it to kind of process his own decision making, which is kind of cool. But to be honest, this book isn't really highly organized. He has a lot of these snippets where he'll just kind of jump in for a certain topic that he really thinks is important, maybe meditation, maybe it's health, something like that. So there's a lot of just variability to how the book is structured. Yeah. So some people argue you can get a lot from reading all these short 1 to 2 page excerpts from the podcast with all these successful people. But I think at a certain point, it's not useful since you realize everyone's successful. Everyone's achieved success in slightly different ways, doing slightly different things. So you should just get to work making your own kind of success. He interviews people all the way from movie industries, comedians, like, all the way to just like startup investors and people who have founded companies. And he's like asking like just really random questions like, what's your favorite book? Or like, what's like your favorite movie? Or like, and they get into all these weird side stories where you learn a lot about the people, but I just don't know how much actionable, practical advice is actually in here. So for example, like maybe 10 stories about successful people is useful, but not 100 because of decision paralysis, right? So if you have all this advice and all these billionaires are doing slightly different things, it's like, what am I supposed to do with it, right? Because if I have 100 of this different pieces of advice, I can't actually do anything with those advice because they're all contradictory to some degree. And this is where I think the book is actually not very helpful because I've read this all now. I've realized that, okay, all these successful people are all doing slightly different things in their routines and how they like function, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you try to copy them, it's just not going to work because they're all successful and they all do stuff slightly differently. So I think you have to just focus on trying to put in the work that's going to make you successful and focus on making your own definition of success. I think that's the most important thing from this book. Additionally, they go into a little bit about affirmations, about how to, just focus on like the belief system and mindset. Affirmations are a little bit complicated, but I would say that having a very strong belief of your own ability to become successful is something that's going to help you in your journey to success because there's a lot of challenges. And if you don't have that belief, it's going to make it 10 times harder. Okay, finally getting to some practical advice. To become ultra successful in marketing, you should focus first on making 1,000 people extremely, extremely happy, and then you'll watch your income skyrocket. Because you have to realize that once things spread, they always start from a beginning point, and that beginning point typically is like 1,000 people who are extremely excited about what you're doing, and they will begin to radiate outwards towards others, and eventually things will grow. Some good advice is do things you're interested in, and eventually you'll be able to create your own job or business career path to do what you want to do. I think that's even more true today with like content creation, social media, and digital stuff related to AI. There's so many different avenues with which you can actually make your own career rather than having to fit within the confines of societal norms for like what a job career should be like. I think this thing that I'm about to share right now, this analogy, is probably the biggest piece of gold in the entire book. And trust me, there's not a lot of gold in this book. It's a bucket and rocks analogy. So the idea is your life is like a bucket and you have these big priorities like family, like maybe work, or like maybe spending time with loved ones. And those are the big rocks. And then the sand or the smaller rocks is all these like little minute things, like maybe you have a little extra activity you like to do once in a while, or maybe you have to go take kids to the store, or you take on another project at work, like those kind of more smaller things that are not big picture, right? So like health, family, maybe work, those are the 3 big picture things, and then you have a bunch of other smaller stuff. In order to fit everything in your bucket, they're saying put those 3 huge rocks that are the most important into your bucket first. And just like how you put rocks in a bucket, right, there's going to be some gaps. Then you can put the smaller rocks and they'll automatically fill the gaps. But if you do it the other way around, let's say you first prioritize all these small things, then you won't have enough time to put in for the bigger, more important stuff. So pretty much what it's saying is have your priorities straight, have your priorities very clear, stick to them, and you'll still have enough time for the other stuff in between those priorities, guaranteed. But it's like a lot of times you have meetings and things that will eat away at your time if you're not really strict with your priorities and clear that of what you can and cannot do, what you will and will not do, what projects you will and will not take on. When you're starting out in your journey to success, you need to remove your ego. Since you don't have anything, be willing to do the extra work and work under other people. Don't think you're better than you are because you likely haven't developed the actual skill set necessary to truly be successful yet. You have to play the long game. So this is a pretty good piece of advice too. Surround yourself with 3 people. 1 who is where you want to be eventually. 1 who is at your level but doing a better job than you and someone you respect. And the 3rd person should be someone who is doing the same work you did 3 years ago but is doing it better than you. This will allow you to like simultaneously strive to be better, evaluate how you're doing right now and how you can improve, and look back in the past of how you could have done things differently. And that is ultimately the best machine for constant iteration and improvement and refining. So those were my takeaways from Tools of Titans. If I had to rate this, I'll probably give it like a 1 out of 10. I think the two biggest pieces of advice were that like bucket and rocks analogy, and probably the idea that everybody should just read, and maybe you should surround yourself with those 3 different people I mentioned. Otherwise, I think this book's kind of useless, and maybe you could get the same thing from watching like a single podcast. So I would highly not recommend this book, and you should totally check out some of the other books I've done in my book review, because those are way more worth your time. If you have any questions or comments or want me to do a different book, put them in the comments below. Otherwise, make sure you guys subscribe for more.